Now we're live.
All right, we are live. Welcome back, everybody. Episode 3 of the Justin and
Caitlin show.
hey, still haven't
Getting
got
down
this
pat.
whole mirrored thing. I just cut my hand off there in the camera, but we're trying here,
You
people.
can't see because of the comment. Ah,
You're right. You're right.
there we go.
Hey, there we are. So welcome back. It's week 3. Going through Wayne Dyer's Your Erroneous Zones. I will not make my same joke. Yes, I will. Yeah, I'm gonna keep tradition. Yeah, don't get the book.
There you go.
Yeah, don't get your erogenous zones. At least save that for the weekend. Just kidding.
Well, we are talking about sex tonight.
Hey, we are. It's a
We're
great
like
topic.
accurate for once.
I am looking forward to maybe going through the book Unwanted. I know that's
Ooh.
fan favorite.
That one would be rough. I say we do it. That was a good one.
You met Caitlin the masochist now.
Hey, it pushes you forward in therapy, let me tell you.
There you go. All right, so tonight's chapter we're going through in Your Erroneous Zones by Wayne Dyer is the useless emotions, guilt, and worry. Now, I had this up at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Just something to be mindful of. This book was written in 1976. 1976. Right. So at that point, guilt was a big word. They hadn't really run across the topic of shame, which obviously Brene Brown blew out of the water a few years ago. Yep. So as we're going through this tonight, recognize a lot of Dyer's comments use the word guilt, when in reality, a lot of times he's talking about shame. They just weren't at that point 40 years ago. So just keep that in the back of your mind. We'll try and do our best navigating to remind that, but here we go.
Even add on to like the differentiation between guilt and shame. I know Brene Brown's gone into a lot of this, but for those of you that haven't read any of her books or listened to any of her speaking engagements, there are great ones on YouTube where she breaks down what shame actually does to you physically, mentally, emotionally, all of that. But the easiest way to remember is guilt is the belief that you've done something bad. So guilt, in a way, can show us what we need to change and how we need to grow and can be a motivator if it goes well. Shame is the belief that you are bad. So I know the next part we're going to talk about is really the cultural parts of where shame infiltrates this. So a great example that I hear all the time, especially listening to parents talk to their little children. And this could be extended family as well. I teach dance. And so a lot of times what I hear is the family will come in like, oh, you were such a good girl and you did so good. But in that moment, instead of just saying, oh, you did great today, it's, oh, you were a good girl. And the behavior has become attached to who they are. Or it's, oh, no, you were a terrible boy, like bad boy. You don't want to do that. And again, the behavior is becoming attached to who that child is. And that's really an easy, very simple example of shame.
Yeah, and I think one of my big battles is a lot of what happened in my life was that shame factor got like blasted at me where I was like a bad human being. Like I might have done something silly as a teenager or in elementary school, but the way it came down on me was you're a bad human being. You're a bad person.
Yep.
Not, hey, Justin's cool, but next time let's make some different decisions, Yep. Don't tell the substitute teacher to eat your shorts. Okay, that's a true story for those of you out there. But let's move forward and not dwell in my past.
Not currently.
Yeah. Look, so let's be honest. There's a lot of cultures out there that use shame. And the United States is actually, as a country, we use a lot of body shaming. There's just shame in general. And Caitlin is going to talk about a couple spots, and then I'll touch on a few sections. So why don't you lead us off in this cultural area?
So the family and the extended family one we've kind of briefly touched on. Wayne actually uses a couple quotes in the book like, you should feel ashamed of yourself. And he literally puts in parentheses right after the quote, he's like, and how useful is this? like when you hear that, like, oh, you should feel ashamed of yourself, it doesn't motivate you to change. If anything, you change and you actually are more resentful because you're having to change, or it's out of fear. It's out of fear of rejection and wanting that person's approval. So in no way is it really helping you develop and become a healthier person, a more mature person, because you're making that call. I think a big one for me was growing up in different religious environments. And so this doesn't have anything to do with one certain religion, but a lot of religions or legalism use rules and laws to kind of control how everyone functions. And they use fear as well in that, which I know fear is a whole different topic we can get into. But it's amazing how ingrained this can get where you don't even think about it. It's just, I remember, let's say, wearing a tank top. There was so much shame around, okay, would it be okay to show my shoulder? Is it not okay to show my shoulder? But it just becomes ingrained in who you are, so you don't even realize it until you start talking to someone else and they have a whole different view on it, and you start seeing kind of how ingrained that shame has become in your mind, in how you think, and then how you actually end up bullying yourself and critiquing yourself on a daily basis.
Yeah. This is where we get to talk about sex for a little bit. I think a huge area of shame. I think Dyer even mentions in the book that if he had to find a location for guilt, he says I would locate it in the crotch. And I think that's accurate. He uses the idea of using porn, and a lot of times people are going into a porn shop. They're kind of like trying to hide in and run in and do whatever. I would even just take it generally with sex. I mean, how many people are very open and honest about sex and doing it when there's light out, the room has lights on, or, not feeling like this is taboo topic. I can't talk about this with my girlfriends or, my buddies. And I don't know, guys are a little weird about that, but different topic. But seriously, it's this idea of like talking about sex, engaging sex. There's a lot of shame that gets tied to that. A lot of double standards wrapped in that. Typically speaking, I mean, I'm from the Jersey Shore, man. Memorial Day weekend just happened. That's opening day of the lifeguarding season up there on the beach. Being real, man, part of our thing was we had a points program. I didn't necessarily partake in this. But basically you got 1 point for what they called confirmed kill, which was to hook up with a girl. You got 1 point for a blackout, being so drunk you blacked out, and every rescue you had, you got 1 point. At the end of the summer, the dudes who took part in this would tally their points for a winner. Now, obviously, we had female lifeguards. You're caught up in this very hypersexualized. I mean, think about the job being on a beach. You're in even the female guards, you didn't wear one piece. It was a bikini. Obviously, dudes, you're in a board shorts, no shirt. And obviously at the beach, generally speaking, people are wearing bare minimum. It's a very hypersexualized, lots of drinking and whatever. And, think about the pressures of being a woman in that situation.
It's hard,
A lot of sex going on, a lot of hooking up, kissing and whatever. But the dude gets the rep as, oh, man, yeah, he's a player, or, whatever. But what words get thrown out at women? She's a slut. Yep. And man, it's just a shame that gets tied in our sex lives and that we bring into the bed, whether we realize it or not.
We do, yeah.
How many times are hey man, let's be honest, how many people out there won't even have sex unless the room is pitch black?
Yep.
And you're operating literally with shadows and you're getting whacked in the head with an arm. You're like, I didn't know that was there.
Or you have to be someone intoxicated in order to do it. Because there's so much shame around actually being able to be vulnerable and have that experience with someone that you can't be fully present during it.
Then the idea of worrying, and this goes back to parenting and even wraps into shaming. It's the idea of, sometimes people will say things like, I can't help but worrying, and it's because I love you.
No.
Is that true? And there's a moment of, I can't help but worry. Really? And a lot of times I think what we need to do is take a time out, check ourselves for what we call stuck words. Like, I can't, I have to, I should, I must. The whole point of this little section here is, what does that create? A lot of resentment.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of resentment.
I mean, I hear about it at work, where you can talk to like working in different industries the past few years, working in like retail and restaurant industry. There was almost this honor given to employees who would go home and constantly think about work or constantly be willing to pick up a shift or worry about the next day. And it's like, oh, you're a good manager because you worry. Like, no, there's a deeper problem there if you have to constantly worry about your store or the shift. And that actually exhausts you and you're less efficient the next day and you grow to resent the job.
Yep.
It doesn't create a healthy work environment. Then you also pass down that worry and those expectations to your employees, and then they don't want to work there. They don't want to go home and have to worry about the shift or worry about how the store is doing or how the other employees are doing.
Yeah. I mean, we can kind of get wrapped up in that. I'm gonna move us to the next section.
That's fine, yeah.
Dyer makes a heck of a quote here, or a claim rather, and I have to say I appreciate people who are willing to go on a limb and do this, and stand for that and make their claim. I can appreciate that, but here you go. He makes the claim that guilt, again, keep in mind, guilt, shame.
Yeah.
Guilt is the most useless of all the erroneous zones. Agree or disagree? What do you got?
I mean, personally, I agree. I see it every single day, whether it be with clients or even myself, where I will feel so ashamed or guilty over something I've done before and maybe who I used to be, that it will actually stop me from living in the present and becoming who I want to be or changing or reaching out to someone. And I become completely immobilized and I'm so focused on the past that it stops me from living in the present.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a little mixed. I have to say the approval one is what sticks out for me. I can see how all these could get wrapped in together, where I'm worried about somebody's approval. So I don't know. I get his claim, that we're immobilized over guilt, which it's already happened, and I can't guilt myself into feeling better. I can't guilt myself enough to make the past okay.
I wish we could be.
Yeah,
and pass through this.
But, man, I don't know. I don't know where I'd land there. I would probably lean more to disagreeing, but I'm also okay with him making that claim.
Yeah.
I think we'll skip up to here where
Which one?
But it's the idea. I want to say this too. With everything we've talked about, with approval-seeking behavior, breaking free from the past, and tonight with guilt/shame and worry, I want everybody to know we're not bypassing the honest reasons of how we all got here. We all have a story, and those messages got implanted on us, and we've walked them out till we get to therapy and we can start changing up the program a bit. So we're not here minimizing the road to therapy, the road through healing, the road through health, because the honest thing is, making mistakes and learning from them is part of growth. It's necessary for growth, honestly. If we did everything right, why would you want to change? It's usually in our errors and our little ways where we mess up a conversation with words we use, that cause us to change. So I don't want to minimize working through your story, how you got there. Our point in this whole series is for the people who have a pretty good picture up on the wall of how I got there, how I function and why, and have arrived at that question of, so now what? That is really what this series is about. So again, this whole idea, guilt and shame and worry is real. But do we realize how we are being immobilized and that we have a choice in this to change?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about maybe being immobilized by guilt? We've touched on it a little bit already, but how
Yeah.
does the immobilization happen with guilt?
I think for me, ironically, it's tied into approval seeking. So kind of going back to what you were saying earlier. But I get very wrapped up sometimes in decisions I made before and things that I'm like, I would never do that now. I would never date that person now. I would never say that now. And I can get so wrapped up in it that it actually stops me from living out who I am and who I want to be and challenging myself. Because then the guilt sets in and then the messages start like, oh, see, you're not good enough. Or see, you're not worthy. And it's a whole cycle. So I have to almost stop the cycle the minute that shame kicks in, because if not, it's like the shame train, which I think we actually talked about before, where
Hey,
it's super loud and you feel like the train's just running you over. Because once that cycle starts, it goes from that to, see, you should feel all this shame and guilt about who you used to be because you're not good enough, you're not worthy. So then you shouldn't reach out to this person. You shouldn't really embrace who you are becoming now. You really don't deserve to continue healing. And these messages can seem so innocent when they start, and then the cycle gets stronger and stronger. I feel like almost like one of those rip tides, if we bring cards. But you're out in the water, you're fine, everything's good, you're chilling in the little waves, and that rip tide comes out of nowhere, and that's kind of what he's almost talking about here, is the complete immobilization. And what does that mean for you? Like, what are you missing out on in the present due to that? And how is it stopping you from really growing and healing?
yeah, and it's kind of funny you brought in the lifeguarding thing. Trying
It,
his
it,
metaphors.
it hit my head. I was like, oh.
Yeah, it is powerful too. Like your
Mhm.
metaphor getting pulled into that rip. I've been pulled into rip tides, even as a lifeguard. That brought me out literally into the shipping lanes during a storm. That was scary. Got pulled out like 200 yards.
Yeah.
But just like that in a storm. And just think about that when we get pulled into our guilt and messages of I'm not good
Mhm.
enough, I don't deserve this, I shouldn't, whatever.
Yep.
How that pulls us out and how that pulls us out and away from connection. Because
Hmm.
that's something that a riptide, it's safe for us to be by shore and other people. But what does a riptide do?
Pulls you away.
Rips you out into the open ocean, which is, if you've seen Jaws, that's a scary place. At
Thank you.
least that was always my concern. Uh, Look, and I'll touch on worry. This was a huge deal for me in my house growing up. My mom would easily classify as a worry wart, if we want to use that kind of deal. Man, I worried about everything.
Hmm.
Um, and I have to say it's kind of challenging when he says, worrying is a waste of time. You're worried about stuff in the future. Concentrate on right now. Even biblically speaking, if you're a Christian, it says, hey, look, your worry's not going to add a cubit to your life. It's not going to change anything.
Yeah.
And it's this idea of, well, I am worried about that, but do I need to spend my whole current day today? What day is this? Wednesday. Worried
Yeah.
about something that might happen Friday. And I think the key to that is something that might happen Friday. And
Hmm.
I think one of the key things is it's like, well, I always worry. Okay. Well, out of all that worrying, A, what's changed? And B, how much of that has ever come true? Because I
Yeah.
think we got ourselves so spun up, and then we usually find out other person, if they're involved, really wasn't even going that direction. But yet we wasted
Hmm.
23 hours not sleeping, anxious, not eating. Maybe your stomach's all twisted up and grumbly,
Yeah.
and then to find out like it had nothing to do that when the boss says, "Hey, I got a meeting for you." It's actually to promote you,
Yeah.
but we're thinking we're getting fired. And so that's hard, especially nowadays. I'm not denying that. But it's really learning to be in the present moment,
Hmm.
not letting the past yank us back and the too far present
Yeah.
keeping us stuck.
And I
Uh,
like how Dyer, kind of to add on to that, I like how he talks about this as a choice. Because I feel like so often in our culture, we're kind of told, worry and guilt is normal. This is something you'll deal with every day. People worry, like, oh, I'm so worried. It's just so natural, even in our language, how we talk. But what if we had a choice and we didn't have to feel intense worry?
Sorry, I'm like clicking
Oh,
all the
you're
wrong.
good. But it's interesting. It's like, that would completely revamp how we think. It completely revamp how we approach different situations. And he really challenges people like, okay, what are you thinking about? Like, where's your brain at throughout the day? So one quote that I love talking about, and I actually was listening to a sermon, and this is where I got this. I mentioned it during one of our Facebook Lives. And the speaker was like, whatever you meditate on, you will magnify. And whatever you magnify will control you.
Whoa.
And like, I took a step back when I heard it because I was like,
say that again.
So whatever you meditate on, you will magnify. And whatever you magnify will control you. If our worries and our guilt is what we're constantly thinking about, that's what's going to end up controlling our life.
Wow.
And that's when you look back 10 years down the road and you realize you're still stuck in the same patterns you were 10 years ago because the guilt and the shame is still controlling, or the worry has still sucked you in and you're not even able to live in the present.
Yeah, and if you're sucked into the past or so far in the future, you never have an ability to hold the pen and write your story.
Because you're frozen.
Because you're frozen.
Yep.
Yikes.
You keep rereading the same chapter over and over.
That's an interesting quote. Where did I just have up our next piece? I think it was this.
That one.
Yeah. So this is kind of the heavy hitter, getting to the end of this, before we talk about moving forward. At the end of the day, one of the things we all have to wrestle with, if this is an area of struggle, we have to really understand that there is no amount of worrying, no amount of guilt or shaming ourselves that's really going to change much of anything.
No.
And here's why. It's easier to sit in that than take action to change. And I think I might have accidentally deleted one of the other comments. Oh, here it is. Sorry. And it kind of takes us home here with the idea of looking at it from this perspective. How is guilt and worry an avoidance technique? And we've talked about it all night on purpose, that is immobilizing. Because if I sit back and worry about this, or if I sit back and beat myself up, I never actually engage the issue. Okay, sometimes I may feel guilty for flapping my gums at somebody that wasn't in a cool way.
Yep.
Okay, I might feel guilt about that. But what am I going to do? Is it something I said? Like let's say I was talking to you and I said something not cool. I have a couple options. I could say nothing. I could wallow in the guilt and let it eat me up, or I could call you up and say, hey, look, what I said wasn't right. I was in a tough place, blah, blah, whatever the deal.
Yeah.
And I can take action and make amends for it, and you and I can have an adult conversation and start changing some of our relational histories of engaging what's normally avoided in our families. Because normally we learn this avoidance stuff from our family of origin. Now, one little caveat I do want to make. Sometimes we feel guilty over things as we're changing because they're different.
Yeah.
We don't always need to apologize because someone else's feelings got hurt. This is a delicate subject because sometimes we like to talk a bunch of trash and just say, well, I'm just speaking my mind, or that's just how it is. Look, there's a way to deliver a message to somebody in love. And being kind, you can be firm but kind, firm and fair. And they may be pissed at you, but if what you said was true and you weren't a jerk about it, man, that's not something for you to carry.
Yep.
And that's important because there's this moment of sometimes we feel, I need to apologize for everything I did. No.
It's like, no.
No.
Especially if you're setting a boundary, and this is with relationships that were already there, and now you're learning that a new boundary needs to be set for who you are and who you're becoming. Boundaries, Andrea talked about this during a Facebook Live. Boundaries hurt. If they haven't been there and you're setting a brand new one, it sucks. And there is an adjustment period there. And if the other person is not used to it, or they're not on the same game plan as you to set these boundaries, it's not always easy. But that doesn't mean that that was your fault. So that's a very good point to bring up.
So I'm going to take that thing down there.
Okay.
So, Caitlin, why don't you take us home, so to speak?
Yeah.
Well, I'll hit you with our question. The whole series started. So now what? All right.
Well,
I've got guilt, worry issues. Now what?
peeling back the blanket. Like when you were talking about the shame and the guilt and the worry, I was imagining this blanket in my head. It was like almost everything that we don't end up dealing with that's below the shame or below the guilt or below the worry. Almost like when you're a kid and you stuff all your toys underneath the blanket when your parents tell you to clean your room. You're like, oh, look, it's clean. It's underneath my bed or underneath my blanket. It's not clean, but it looks better.
Hey.
It's almost like everything we don't want to deal with kind of gets shoved. And part of this process of healing and growing and getting rid of the shame is removing that blanket, which is much easier done in connection and having support around you, because what's underneath isn't always pretty. And sometimes it's been a lot of stuff that's been pushed underneath there. And it's going to be slowly sifting through that. Just like as a kid, you didn't magically know how to pull up like all of your little toys in all their little places. You went toy by toy. And you figured out where it needed to go. You figured out where the best place for it would be. And you had people around you, ideally, that parental figure or that attachment figure, to help you clean up.
But how do they move forward? So that's part of putting our story together.
Yeah.
And the puzzle pieces, the toys, which is a cool metaphor. You know, we pull the blanket up. We got all these toys in there. I was notorious for shoving everything under the bed.
Yeah.
Oh, crap. Everything under the bed. It's probably still there to this day. But
terrifying.
No, but really, all right. Now, what would somebody do to move on? Like, I could worry or I could have guilt.
Yeah.
But you said earlier we have a choice.
We do. And I think the first part's actually becoming aware of when you're being sucked into the guilt or shame cycle or the worry cycle.
Good thought. Which
one is more prevalent for you at different points? And when are you being sucked in? Because if you don't even know that you're in the rip current and you're being sucked out there and you don't realize till you're at the shipyards 300 yards away, that's a problem. But that takes a while sometimes if you're used to being in the rip current constantly to realize when you're in that peaceful water and when you're actually being sucked in. Because it can happen so quickly. Mm-hmm. And then that's where I would also say lean into connection and build that support system of people that will challenge you and encourage you. Because when these have become ingrained thought patterns, they don't change overnight. And they don't go away usually on our own. Usually it takes that connection to work through these things together.
Cool. Cool.
How else would you answer that? Like, what else would you add?
Well, I just think there's an element, always with all this. Okay. There's an element of just taking action.
Yeah.
And I have the moment there where I could be worried about something that's going to happen Friday. Mm-hmm. But I have a choice in that. Do I want to spend the rest of Wednesday evening and all day Thursday night, and then let's say Friday morning, worrying about a 1:00 meeting? Or do I want to just say, all right, it's going to be what it is. Yep. I'm as prepared as I can be. I'm going to be focused on, hanging out with my wife or fixing the screen in the kitchen. Doing whatever. These are real tasks and things I have going on. And it's this element of remembering I have a choice to not go down that road. And just because someone wants to maybe guilt me, like we were talking about earlier, different institutions and systems want to chop us down. I don't need to stand for that anymore. I'm not a 6-year-old kid anymore. I'm a 34-year-old man. Mm-hmm. And it may be wounding because it's pushing buttons in us. Yeah. But I don't have to stand for this. And this is part of being that healthy adult, setting boundaries. And so for me, it's about this active action-taking part of, okay, to your point, be aware of it. Be aware you're in a rip current because you're aware that you need to swim parallel and get out of it. Yeah. But what are we going to do? Do I really want to sit in this? Do I really want to let this run? Because I'm frozen.
Yep.
I want to live my life frozen? No. Which does lead us to our last little thing here
Question.
that we're signing. Not really a question. We'll end on that.
Okay.
We are starting. Was it June 4th? Boundaries and dating with Henry Cloud and John Townsend. Let me get my fingers out of the way there. Whoop. All right. We'll be going through this book, kind of similar to this. Caitlin will be leading that one, and that will be starting June 4th, so that'll be Thursdays. So Wednesdays we'll continue finishing up the Wayne Dyer book. I don't know what we'll transition to yet. And then Thursdays will be Boundaries and Dating starting June 4th, same time, 7:30. And next week, for those of you who are signing in every Wednesday, it is Exploring the Unknown. Only the insecure strive for security.
That one should be fun.
Actually, one of my favorite chapters. I like this one. Yeah. And so, what was your final question you wanted to leave on people's minds before we sign out on episode 3 of the Justin and Caitlin show?
I would say, what would change in your life, and specific things, what would specifically change in your life if you were to actually live in the present? So we're talking about being immobilized in the present and how we're living in the past or or trying to live in the future. What would this actually look like for you to live in the present and not just exist? Because I feel like so often we get used to simply existing, and we're completely somewhere else. So
Autopilot.
For you, yeah. What would it change for you to actually take the pen and begin writing? And what would you want to write? Like, what would you want that next chapter to look like? Even if you don't take action on it tonight, just imagining what would that actually look like? Because that might shock you how different it is from how you're currently living or how you're currently acting or who you're currently being with. If you were to actually live in the present like that, it might be a big discrepancy there.
Nice.
So, nice and light as we end.
Hey, well, that wraps us up here. Week 3, episode 3 of the Justin and Caitlin show. So yeah, we'll catch y'all next week, Wednesday at 7:30, and then Thursday at 7:30.
2 episodes in 1 week.
Woo! Boy, better be getting paid for this. No, I'm just kidding. All right, we'll catch y'all next week. Peace.
Adios.